Teachers around the country are protesting efforts to limit what they can teach about racism. Education Week reports 25 states have taken steps to keep critical race theory or other teachings on race out of schools, but only 5 states so far have passed laws. Becky Pringle is the president of the National Education Association, and she joins us now to talk about this. So not all of these bills or other efforts to limit what teachers can teach have been successful, as you know, but about 25 states have attempted to do that. That's half the country. What does that say to you about the attitude towards teaching students about systemic racism?
It's good to be with you this morning. What it says is that as educators, we must continue to lift our voice to ensure that our students have the truth. We know, I can tell you as a teacher for over 30 years, this is what I know about my students. When you teach them the truth, they have the creative imaginations about what they can actually do to make a difference so that they can actually confront the injustices that have been built into every social system within this country. We should never underestimate our students' ability to not only learn about the complete and rich history of this country, but to come together with their shared stories and make sure that they have the opportunity to be those problem solvers we need them to be so we can confront the institutional racism that this country lives with every single day. And it's not just about history. It's about right now, as we very well know.
So as you know, with social media and other forms of media, sometimes certain voices are amplified and, they appear louder than the numbers that they represent. So I'm really curious because you represent all types of people, all teachers and parents across the country, students. What are you hearing? Because I see these splashy headlines about, parents that are outraged and they're pulling their kids out of these private schools because of critical race theory. But what are you hearing from parents and students about these efforts to restrict the teaching of systemic racism and critical race theory?
We've talked with parents and students and educators all over this country, and this is what we have heard. They want the educators who have been trained to teach our children to make decisions about what and how they learn, not politicians who are trying to actually not be transparent about what it is they're trying to do. We know that these same politicians have not invested in our public schools for decades. They've not given our students and educators the resources they need so they can be successful. And these are just tactics to divert our attention away from what our students need. But I tell you this, our parents and educators are not buying into that. They are standing with us. That's why they joined us on our efforts on last Saturday, on June 12th, to teach the truth. Parents, allies throughout all of our communities are standing up and saying, no, we have a rich history in this country. We need to make sure that all of that history is included in what we teach our students because we believe in them. And we know that when we teach the truth, they will become the leaders of a just society.
So, Becky, let me ask you, as somebody who doesn't have kids, Anne-Marie knows that the title of my future book is I Don't Have Kids, but my question is related because I think there may be a lot of people who are watching this who are probably in the same boat, and they're wondering not so much about the controversy surrounding whether or not critical race theory is taught, but which students where are the battle lines being drawn? Because I've seen some people saying that, look, these schools and these districts in some of these states are looking to ban something that isn't even going to be taught to middle schoolers or to kids in, 3rd or 4th or 5th grade. What we're really talking about is perhaps kids in high school or later or even at the senior year, but mostly topics like this and the history around this, it sounds to me that it's collegiate. So I just want to get a sense of, are first graders, is it because people think that first graders are going to be taught critical race theory?
As educators, we always talk about what is age appropriate when we teach. But let me tell you, I actually am a mother and I am a grandmother. And I had the opportunity during this pandemic to actually watch my grandson, who was in third grade, he's 8 years old, learn all year virtually. Here in my basement, I had a third grade class. And I was so incredibly proud of his teacher, who assigned to all of the students in their school, in her class, the assignment of talking about their history. And so I got to work with my grandson, Carter, on understanding how his ancestors were enslaved. So I got to talk about my great-grandfather. My father had taught me about. He, of course, was a history teacher. And let me just tell you, his heart would be breaking right now with this conversation. But he taught me about that. He taught us about how it's important to go to where our ancestors were enslaved in Charlottesville, Virginia. He taught me about that. I taught my grandson about that. And then my grandson was able to teach the other students in his class about his rich history, not only about the fact that his great-great-grandfather had been enslaved, but about the contributions that his ancestors and African Americans all over this country have made to this country and continue to make to this country, the contributions that people of all races, of all backgrounds, that live in all zip codes, need to be able to have that opportunity to tell that rich history.
I was reading an article in the Washington Post in which you are quoted in, and something really struck me. There's also sort of another teacher that's quoted in it, and what they were talking about was the fact that because of how politicized this conversation has become, the fact that we're not just talking about just teaching the actual history of this country. Now it's become this whole other agenda that parents are getting, or teachers are getting pushed back for just regular things, like maybe introducing Alice Walker or other, African-American artists. And so I'm flipping my words all over the place, authors. And so teachers are now concerned about even introducing that sort of thing into the classroom. They'd rather just go back to what they were teaching before instead of having to fight with parents over every little adjustment. I can't imagine how concerning that must be for you.
Oh, Anne-Marie, that's exactly why we're doing what we're doing. We're lifting up our voices. We're coming together in collective action because that's not okay, as you very well know. We need to teach authors of all racial backgrounds. We need to talk about the contributions of LGBTQ plus people in this country. We need to raise up the incredible work that our people with disabilities have done in this country. We need to tell that rich history. And so we are not going to back down. We're not going to be afraid to teach it because we know that to not teach it, we're not telling the truth. And we are doing a disservice to our students. And we are not about to do that. So you will continue to see us rise up and push back, whether it is through marching and rallying or teach-ins, which we did last Saturday, or any kind of legal action that we need to take to ensure that educators can teach the truth. And I will emphasize again that we are not by ourselves. We know that this is what our students need and deserve from us.
Becky Pringle, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.